Right now, as you've clicked on this video, there's a mysterious object circling above our heads that shouldn't exist, according to our understanding of human space exploration. This is an object that's been silently orbiting Earth for over 13,000 years, long before we even invented the wheel, let alone rockets capable of reaching space. This is the story of the Black Knight satellite, and by the end of this documentary, you'll understand why NASA has tried to explain it away, why amateur radio operators have been tracking its signals for decades, and what this ancient sentinel might really be doing up there in the darkness of space. Before we dive in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is. We're on to building a global community here, so without further ado, let's begin, shall we? The anomaly. You're scrolling through social media late at night, and then you spot an image, a dark, irregular object floating against the black void of space. The caption claims it's been there for 13,000 years, orbiting Earth, watching us. They call it the Black Knight satellite. The story feels impossible to ignore. Ancient, alien, hidden in plain sight above our heads. Supposedly tracked by agencies that won't admit it exists, photographed by astronauts who can't explain what they saw. But here's the thing about impossible stories. Sometimes they're windows into something stranger than fiction. This documentary asks a simple question. What is the Black Knight satellite? And the answer turns out to be far more interesting than either believers or skeptics expect. Let's start with what people claim. According to the legend, this object has circled Earth for millennia, long before Sputnik, long before humanity even conceived of spaceflight. Some say Nikola Tesla detected its signals in the late 19th century. Others point to military reports from the 1950s about unknown objects in orbit. The most compelling evidence seems to be a photograph from 1998, a space shuttle mission, an object that looks nothing like modern spacecraft. The narrative weaves together these disparate threads into something cohesive, something that suggests we're not alone, that someone or something placed a watcher in our skies thousands of years ago. Type Black Knight satellite into any search engine. You'll find hundreds of articles, thousands of forum posts, videos with millions of views. The story has become self-sustaining. Each retelling adds new details. Each image analysis finds new patterns. But peel back the layers and something curious happens. The story doesn't hold together. It fragments. Each piece of evidence points somewhere different. Tesla's signals have nothing to do with the military reports. The military reports don't match the photographs. The photographs show something mundane that somehow became extraordinary. This isn't a story about an alien artifact. It's something more fascinating. It's a case study in how myths form in the information age, how separate events collide in the public imagination, how photographs get divorced from context, how pattern recognition overrides critical thinking. We're going to trace this legend back to its origins, not to debunk it with smug satisfaction, not to mock people who found it compelling, but to understand how a thermal blanket photographed by astronauts became proof of ancient alien surveillance. The Black Knight legend touches something deep in human consciousness, the desire to believe we're special, that we're being watched, that the universe holds secrets just beyond our grasp. These aren't foolish impulses. They're the same drives that fuel scientific discovery. The same curiosity that sent us to space in the first place. But belief requires scrutiny. Wonder demands questions. The most respectful thing we can do with extraordinary claims is investigate them thoroughly. So we'll follow the evidence. All of it. The radio signals, the radar contacts, the newspaper articles, the classified projects, the orbital photographs. We'll speak with astronomers who track objects in space, historians who documented early space exploration, engineers who worked on the missions that supposedly encountered this satellite. What emerges is a story about how information travels and transforms, about how classified military projects created public suspicion, about how the internet allowed scattered pieces of data to find each other and form patterns that never existed in reality. The Black Knight satellite is real, just not in the way people think. It's real as a cultural phenomenon, as folklore, as a perfect example of how modern myths are born from the collision of genuine mysteries, deliberate secrets, and innocent misunderstandings. Each part of this documentary will examine one thread of the legend. We'll see how each piece contributed to the whole, how Tesla's legitimate experiments got retroactively connected to a story he never told, how Cold War paranoia amplified ordinary events into extraordinary ones, how a piece of space debris became an ancient mystery. But we'll also discover genuine wonders along the way. Real satellites that broadcast presidential messages from orbit, military projects that filled space with millions of copper needles, radio echoes that still puzzle scientists decades later. The actual history of early space exploration contains plenty of strange truths without needing to invent alien artifacts. The goal isn't to ruin the magic, it's to find the real magic hidden beneath the myth. Because understanding how we create these stories teaches us something valuable about human cognition, about how we process information, about why we're drawn to patterns even when they don't exist. The Black Knight satellite doesn't exist, but the reasons people believe in it are absolutely real. And those reasons tell us something profound about ourselves. So let's begin at the beginning. Not with an alien artifact, but with a brilliant inventor standing in a wooden laboratory in Colorado, listening to strange signals crackling through his equipment. The year is 1899. Tesla has no idea that his experiments will, decades later, become the foundation of one of the internet's most enduring mysteries. Neither do we, watching from the future, have any idea how a simple mishap during a space shuttle mission will provide the visual cornerstone of an elaborate myth. The pieces exist separately, scattered across time, waiting for the internet to bring them together. The first signal, Nikola Tesla's star message. Colorado Springs, summer of 1899. Lightning storms roll across the prairie with such ferocity that the entire sky seems alive. Nikola Tesla watches from his laboratory, a wooden structure housing equipment that draws power directly from the storms themselves. He's conducting experiments that push the boundaries of electrical science, trying to prove that energy can be transmitted wirelessly across vast distances. Tesla believes he's on the verge of transforming civilization. Free energy for everyone. No wires. No infrastructure. Just his magnifying transmitter pulling power from the Earth itself and broadcasting it to receivers anywhere on the planet. But tonight, he notices something unexpected. His equipment detects signals. Rhythmic patterns, regular pulses that don't match the chaotic bursts from lightning. Tesla is many things: brilliant, eccentric, prone to grandiose pronouncements, but he's also a careful observer. He documents these signals meticulously, studies their patterns, tries to determine their source. He considers terrestrial explanations, other inventors conducting similar experiments, military communications, atmospheric phenomena he doesn't yet understand, but the signals don't fit any known source. So Tesla allows himself to speculate. What if these pulses come from beyond Earth? What if another civilization is trying to communicate? He writes about his observations, carefully, tentatively. The feeling is constantly growing on me that I had been the first to hear the greeting of one planet to another. This isn't the wild claim it might seem. In 1899, the possibility of life on Mars is widely accepted in scientific circles. Astronomer Percival Lowell has published detailed observations of supposed canals on the Martian surface. Evidence, he argues, of an advanced civilization managing scarce water resources. Tesla's speculation fits the scientific zeitgeist. He's not claiming little green men are calling Earth. He's suggesting that if intelligent life exists on Mars, they might be experimenting with radio technology just as he is. The press loves it. Tesla hears signals from Mars reads one headline. Others are more skeptical but still fascinated. The brilliant inventor who brought us alternating current now claims to have detected alien communications. Tesla never backs down from the claim. Years later, he'll still insist those signals were real, that they came from space, that humanity isn't alone. Modern analysis suggests simpler explanations. The signals Tesla detected were likely natural radio emissions from Jupiter, a phenomenon not discovered until decades later. The planet's powerful magnetic field generates intense radio waves that pulse with remarkable regularity. Jupiter's radio emissions would have been strong enough to detect with Tesla's sensitive equipment. The patterns would have seemed artificial because they're generated by a regular process, the rotation of Jupiter's magnetic field as the planet spins. Tesla couldn't have known this. Radio astronomy didn't exist yet. The idea that planets naturally emit radio waves wouldn't be understood for another 50 years. So his speculation about Mars was reasonable. Wrong, but reasonable, based on the best scientific knowledge available at the time. Here's where the Black Knight legend begins to form, though Tesla himself had nothing to do with it. Decades later, writers looking for historical precedents will seize on this story. Tesla detected mysterious signals, they'll say. Signals that couldn't be explained, signals from an artificial source. Never mind that Tesla thought the signals came from Mars, not from an object orbiting Earth. Never mind that he was speculating based on limited information. Never mind that we now know Jupiter produces exactly the kind of signals he described. The story gets simplified, retrofitted. Tesla becomes the first person to detect the Black Knight satellite. His careful scientific speculation becomes proof of ancient alien technology. This transformation reveals something important about how legends grow. They start with kernels of truth, real events, genuine mysteries. Then later interpreters reframe those events to fit new narratives. Tesla really did detect unusual signals. That's documented fact. He really did wonder if they might be artificial, also documented. But the leap from unexplained signals from space to ancient alien satellite requires connecting dots that don't actually connect. The Black Knight story needs an origin point, a first detection. Tesla's experiments provide that. Never mind that nothing Tesla actually said or wrote supports the connection. The fact that he heard something strange is enough. This pattern will repeat throughout the legend. Real events, real mysteries, real scientific observations, all gradually detached from their original context and woven into a larger narrative that the original observers would never recognize. Tesla spent the rest of his life pursuing wireless power transmission. He never returned to the idea of Martian communications in any serious way. It was a moment of speculation, a what if based on incomplete data. But in the ecology of modern myths, that moment of speculation became evidence. The brilliant Tesla, who revolutionized electrical engineering, surely knew something we don't. Surely his detection of those signals means something profound. Except it doesn't. It means Tesla was human, brilliant but fallible, working at the edge of knowledge where speculation is necessary because facts are scarce. The signals he heard were real, his interpretation was understandable, his legacy as an inventor is secure. But his contribution to the Black Knight legend is entirely retroactive, applied by others long after his passing. This is how the first thread enters the tapestry, a genuine scientific observation, misinterpreted at the time, reinterpreted later to fit a narrative that hadn't been invented yet. Next, we'll jump forward to 1954, when newspapers reported something that sounded impossible, unknown objects in orbit around Earth, years before any nation had the technology to put them there. The Dark Knight, a newspaper sensation. May 1954. The Cold War sits heavy over America. Soviet capabilities are on paranoia runs high. Every unexplained event might be enemy action. Donald Kehoe steps into this atmosphere with an explosive claim. Kehoe is a former Marine Corps officer turned aviation writer. More importantly, he's become America's most prominent UFO researcher. His books sell hundreds of thousands of copies. His articles reach millions. And now he's saying something that sounds impossible. The United States Air Force has detected objects in orbit around Earth. 2 of them, natural satellites, like small moons humanity never knew existed. Except here's the problem. We haven't put anything in orbit yet. Neither has the Soviet Union. Sputnik won't launch for another 3 years. The space age hasn't begun. So what are these objects? Kehoe's claims appear in multiple newspapers. The stories vary in details, but agree on the core facts. Unknown objects, detected by military radar, orbiting Earth. No one knows what they are. Some headlines call them natural satellites. Others suggest they might be space stations. The term Dark Knight appears in at least one article, though later retellings will smooth this into Black Knight. The Air Force responds cautiously. They don't confirm Kehoe's claims directly, but they also don't deny them entirely. A spokesman mentions that radar sometimes detects asteroids passing near Earth. Nothing to worry about. This ambiguous response only fuels speculation. Why won't they give a straight answer? What are they hiding? The truth, when it emerges, is less dramatic but more interesting. The objects Kehoe described were likely asteroids. not orbiting Earth, but passing nearby. Radar in the 1950s was improving rapidly. Operators were detecting objects they couldn't identify. Most turned out to be natural space debris, rocks that had been floating through the solar system long before humanity existed. But Kehoe's interpretation reveals something about the era. The public was primed to believe in secret surveillance. The Soviets might have achieved space capability without announcing it. The military might be tracking threats they couldn't discuss publicly. These weren't unreasonable concerns. The Cold War involved genuine secrets. Real weapons programs hidden from public view, legitimate reasons for military secrecy. Kehoe himself was convinced that the government was hiding evidence of extraterrestrial visitation. His books argued that UFOs were alien spacecraft and that authorities knew it but refused to admit the truth. His interpretation of radar contacts fit this worldview perfectly. Here's where the second thread enters the Black Knight tapestry. Kehoe's report of unknown objects in orbit. Never mind that he never called them Black Knight. Never mind that the objects were likely asteroids, not satellites. Never mind that subsequent investigation found mundane explanations. The story persists because it touches that nerve of suspicion. They're watching us. They won't tell us the truth. Something's up there. Decades later, when people assemble the Black Knight legend, they'll point to 1954 as confirmation. Tesla heard it in 1899. The military detected it in 1954. A pattern emerges, an ancient satellite making itself known periodically throughout history, except the pattern is artificial, created by later interpreters drawing connections between unrelated events. Tesla heard Jupiter's radio emissions. Kehoe reported asteroid detections. Neither has anything to do with an artificial satellite. But the story sounds good. It feels meaningful. And in the absence of definitive proof either way, belief fills the gaps. The newspaper coverage from 1954 reveals another pattern. Journalists of that era were less skeptical than modern readers might expect. The idea of unknown objects in space, while surprising, wasn't automatically dismissed. Scientists openly discussed the possibility of discussed the possibilites orbiting Earth. The line between reasonable speculation and wild theory was blurrier. Kehoe leveraged this ambiguity masterfully. He presented his claims in authoritative language, cited military sources, made it sound like inside information had leaked. Whether he genuinely believed his interpretation or was embellishing for book sales remains unclear. What's clear is the impact. His claims entered the public consciousness. They became part of the discourse around space and surveillance, and they waited there, dormant, until later events would give them new life. The 1950s were a strange time for space speculation. Too early for hard facts, late enough that space travel seemed imminent. Scientists and amateurs alike could propose theories that hadn't been tested yet. In this environment, Kehoe's claims about unknown satellites seemed plausible enough to make headlines, but not crazy enough to be immediately dismissed. They occupied that sweet spot of possibility that keeps stories alive. What Kehoe probably detected, if his sources were genuine, were the first systematic observations of near-Earth asteroids. Radar technology was finally good enough to spot these objects. Operators didn't yet have enough experience to classify them confidently. Everything unknown became potentially significant. This is normal in any developing technology. Early radar operators saw lots of things they couldn't explain. Most turned out to be weather phenomena, equipment artifacts, or natural objects. But before you have enough data to recognize patterns, everything is mysterious. The dark night or dark night mentioned in one article might have been a journalist's dramatic flourish, a way to make the story more exciting. Or it might have been a military code name that got leaked. We don't know. What we do know is that this phrase, or something like it, entered the mythology. By the time the internet arrived, Black Knight had become the standard name for the supposed ancient satellite. Kehoe went on to write more books about UFOs. He founded the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. He remained convinced until his passing that the government was hiding the truth about extraterrestrial visitation. His 1954 claims about unknown satellites became a footnote in his larger body of work. But that footnote would outlive everything else he wrote because it provided a crucial piece of the puzzle. an official sounding report from the right era, evidence that something was up there before humanity officially reached space. The Air Force's non-denial denial helped cement the story. They couldn't say exactly what Keyhoe was talking about without revealing classified radar capabilities, so they gave vague responses that satisfied no one. This ambiguity is fertile ground for legends. When official sources won't give straight answers, speculation rushes in to fill the void. The Voice from Space, Project Score, and Real Secrets, December 18, 1958. Families across America gather around radios. Evening broadcasts carry the usual mix of news and entertainment. Then something unprecedented happens. A voice breaks through. Speaking from space, President Eisenhower delivering a Christmas message. From orbit, this is the President of the United States speaking. Through the marvels of scientific advance, my voice is coming to you from a satellite circling in outer space. The message continues, speaking of peace, of humanity's desire for cooperation, of the dawn of a new age. For most Americans, this is their first encounter with the reality of space technology. Sputnik orbited the previous year, but it only beeped. Now a human voice speaks from the void. The future has arrived. What the public doesn't know is how classified this project was. Project Score. Signal communication by orbiting relay equipment. An Atlas rocket converted into a temporary satellite, carrying a tape recorder, broadcasting pre-recorded messages. The military developed Score in secret. They wanted to test communications technology, prove that satellites could relay messages around the world. The president's Christmas greeting was secondary, a public relations masterstroke that disguised the military purpose. The Atlas rocket itself was essentially a repurposed missile, designed to carry nuclear warheads, modified to reach orbit and test new technologies. This dual-use nature characterized early space programs. Military objectives dressed in civilian clothing. Score operated for just 13 days. The batteries died. The orbit decayed. Within weeks, the entire apparatus burned up in the atmosphere. But those 13 days changed everything. They proved that satellites could work, that voices could be transmitted from space, that humanity was really, truly leaving the planet. Here's why Score matters for the Black Knight legend. It demonstrates that real space secrets existed. Real satellites were launched without full public disclosure. Real military projects operated in orbit under the guise of scientific experiments. This verified secrecy fed public suspicion. If they hid Score until after launch, what else might they be hiding? If satellites can transmit voices, what else might they transmit? If missiles can become satellites, how many other objects are up there that we don't know about? The answer, as it turns out, was quite a few. The late 1950s saw numerous classified launches, military reconnaissance satellites, communications tests, experimental systems. Most were declassified years later. But at the time, the public had no idea how crowded space was becoming. This creates the perfect environment for myths. Verified secrecy plus limited information equals unlimited speculation. Project Score also introduced the American public to the idea that space wasn't just for science. It was strategic, political, military, the high ground in any future conflict. This realization shifted how people thought about satellites. No longer were they just tools for observation or communication. They were assets, territory, extensions of national power. This militarization of space made the idea of a hidden ancient satellite more plausible. If we're putting secret objects in orbit, maybe someone else did too. The technology behind Score was remarkably simple: a modified tape recorder, a radio transmitter, batteries. The entire satellite was just the Atlas rocket's upper stage. Already in orbit after boosting the payload, engineers realized they could use the rocket itself as a satellite. This improvisation characterized early space efforts. Nothing was purpose-built. Everything was repurposed. Missiles became launchers. Bomb casings became satellites. Military technology found civilian applications. The public message about peace and cooperation masked this reality. Eisenhower's voice, speaking of international harmony, came from a military rocket designed to deliver destruction. The irony was lost on most listeners, but the message worked. Americans felt pride. The space race was real, and they were part of it. A voice from the stars promised that humanity's future lay beyond Earth. Score's brief life also highlighted how fragile early satellites were. 13 days of operation. Then silence. Space was harsh. Technology was primitive. Survival was brief. This creates an interesting question. If an object has been orbiting Earth for 13,000 years, as the Black Knight legend claims, what kind of technology would that require? How could anything survive that long? The answer is it couldn't, at least not with any technology we understand. Orbital mechanics ensure that objects without propulsion eventually fall. Radiation degrades materials. Micrometeorites cause damage. Even in the vacuum of space, time destroys everything. But SCORE also proved that satellites could exist, that human-made objects could circle Earth, that space was accessible. This proof of concept changed the context for all future claims about unknown objects in orbit. When later photographs emerged of strange objects in space, people had a reference point. They knew satellites were real. They knew some were secret. They knew technology existed to put things in orbit and keep them there. Project SCORE bridged the gap between speculation and reality. Before it, satellites were theoretical. After it, they were fact. And facts can be twisted to support any number of theories. The military learned valuable lessons from SCORE. Communications from orbit were feasible. Future spy satellites could transmit intelligence in real time. The strategic value of space was confirmed. They also learned about public relations. The president's Christmas message generated enormous goodwill. Positive coverage, national pride. Future projects would balance secrecy with strategic disclosure, but the initial secrecy set a precedent. Space programs involved classified elements. Not everything would be announced. The public would have to trust that hidden projects served national interests. This trust was harder to maintain after Vietnam, after Watergate, after repeated revelations of government deception. By the time the internet arrived, default skepticism had replaced default trust. The Black legend thrives in this environment. SCORE proved they kept secrets. What other secrets might exist? What else might they be hiding? The questions spiral endward. The truth is both simpler and more complex. Space programs did involve secrets, but most were eventually declassified. Most served clear strategic purposes. Most had mundane explanations. Yet the fact that some secrets were real makes the idea of other, larger secrets seem plausible. If they hid SCORE, why not something more exotic? The logic feels sound even when the evidence doesn't support it. Eisenhower's voice speaking from space marked a turning point. The future arrived. Humanity stepped off Earth, and in doing so, we created new frontiers for mystery and myth. The image, STS-88, and the object. December 1998. Space Shuttle Endeavour orbits Earth on mission STS-88. The crew is making history, connecting the first two modules of what will become the International Space Station. Astronauts work in the cargo bay, attaching Unity to Zarya. It's delicate work. Precision engineering executed in the unforgiving environment of space. No room for error. During a spacewalk, something happens. A thermal blanket comes loose. Not dramatically, not explosively. It just drifts away. These blankets protect equipment from temperature extremes. Multi-layered foil-like material, black on one side, reflective on the other. The crew notes it. Mission Control notes it. It's documented in the official log. Lost equipment happens. Space is full of debris. Thousands of pieces from decades of human activity. One more blanket won't change anything. The astronauts photograph it. Standard procedure. Document everything. The object tumbles slowly, black against the blackness of space. Irregular shape, reflecting sunlight at odd angles. Then the mission continues. Unity and Zarya connect successfully. The first elements of the International Space Station are joined. Humanity takes another step toward permanent presence in space. The lost thermal blanket is forgotten. Fast forward a few years. Someone finds the photographs in NASA's public archive. They're analyzing images from STS-88, looking for something, anything unusual. And there it is, the object, dark, irregular, clearly artificial, floating above Earth. The photograph starts circulating online. What is this? NASA won't explain. It looks ancient, primitive. Not like modern spacecraft at all. The shape is wrong. The texture is wrong. It doesn't match any known satellite. Someone makes the connection. The Black Knight. Night. This must be it. The ancient satellite. Finally photographed clearly. After decades of rumors and speculation, here's visual proof. The image goes viral. Shared across forums, analyzed frame by frame, every detail scrutinized. Look at the geometry. Look at how it's positioned. Look at how it doesn't match any human technology. NASA responds eventually. It's a thermal blanket lost during the mission. They have it documented. It's in the official record. But the response comes too late. The image has already been claimed by the legend, and NASA's explanation seems suspiciously convenient. Of course, they'd say it's a thermal blanket. What else would they say? The photograph becomes the cornerstone of the Black Knight myth, visual evidence, tangible proof, no longer just stories and speculation. Here's something you can see with your own eyes, except it really is a thermal blanket. The mission logs confirm it. The astronauts confirm it. The trajectory matches exactly what you'd expect from space debris at that altitude. But belief doesn't require complicated explanations when simple ones feel like cover-ups. The thermal blanket theory sounds like the kind of thing NASA would say to avoid admitting the truth. This reveals something crucial about how myths solidify. Images are powerful. They bypass skepticism. We trust our eyes even when they deceive us. A photograph of an irregular black object in space feels more real than any amount of documentation explaining what it actually is. The Black Knight photograph is perfect for the legend. It looks mysterious, ancient even. The black color, the odd angles, the way it tumbles, everything suggests something beyond human understanding. That it's actually a piece of modern space equipment made from aluminized mylar somehow makes it less believable than the idea that it's a 13,000-year-old alien artifact. This inversion of plausibility is fascinating. The mundane explanation requires accepting that sometimes debris looks strange. The extraordinary explanation requires accepting alien civilization, ancient astronauts, and a conspiracy spanning decades. Yet for believers, the second option feels more honest. They trust their eyes. The object looks wrong. NASA's explanation feels wrong. Therefore, the explanation must be false. The STS-88 crew themselves have addressed this repeatedly. Commander Robert Cabana has explained in interviews that yes, they lost a thermal blanket. Yes, they photographed it. Yes, that's what people are calling the Black Knight. His testimony carries weight. He was there. He saw it with his own eyes through the shuttle's window. He knows exactly what it was. But for true believers, even astronaut testimony becomes part of the conspiracy. Of course he'd say that. He probably signed confidentiality agreements. NASA controls what he's allowed to discuss publicly. This is how myths become unfalsifiable. Every piece of evidence against them becomes evidence for them. Every denial becomes proof of cover-up. Every mundane explanation becomes suspicious. The thermal blanket photograph did something powerful for the Black Knight legend. It gave the story a face, a visual anchor. Before this, the satellite was abstract, a concept. Now it had form, shape, presence. That the form and shape belonged to something entirely ordinary didn't matter. The image was out there, associated with the legend, impossible to separate them now. Photographers and imaging specialists have analyzed the image extensively. The reflective properties match aluminized mylar. The dimensions match standard thermal blankets used on shuttle missions. The orbital characteristics match space debris at that altitude. Every technical analysis confirms NASA's explanation, and every technical analysis is dismissed by believers as part of the cover-up. This is the trap of conspiracy thinking. Absence of evidence becomes evidence of conspiracy. Presence of evidence becomes evidence of conspiracy. There's no way to disprove the theory because every disproof is reinterpreted as proof. The STS-88 image represents a crucial moment in the Black Knight legend. It's when the story transitioned from niche UFO circles to mainstream internet culture. The photograph could be shared easily, viewed by millions, analyzed by anyone with image software. This democratization of evidence changed how myths spread. No longer did stories require books or television specials. They could propagate through social media, reaching global audiences instantly. The image also benefited from timing. The late 1990s marked the early internet era. Websites devoted to mysteries and conspiracies were proliferating. Communities formed around shared interests. The Black Knight photograph arrived at exactly the right moment to achieve maximum spread. Within years, the image appeared on thousands of websites, embedded in videos, printed in books. It became the definitive visual representation of the legend. That it showed a thermal blanket from a shuttle mission became irrelevant. The image was the thing, and the image looked mysterious enough to support belief. This is perhaps the most important lesson from STS-88. Truth requires context. Remove context, and anything can mean anything. A thermal blanket becomes an alien artifact. Space debris becomes proof of ancient astronauts. The astronauts who photographed it knew exactly what they were seeing. But once those photographs left the controlled environment of mission documentation and entered the wild space of internet speculation, meaning became fluid. The Ancient Astronaut Connection. 1968. Erich von Däniken publishes Chariots of the Gods. The book proposes something radical. Ancient civilizations were visited by extraterrestrial beings. The pyramids, Stonehenge, Nazca lines, all evidence of alien intervention in human history. The book sells millions, translated into dozens of languages, spawns a franchise of sequels and documentaries. Von Däniken becomes the public face of ancient astronaut theory. His central argument is elegant. Look at ancient achievements that seem impossible for the technology of their time. The precision of Egyptian stonework, the astronomical knowledge of the Maya, the engineering of megalithic structures. How did primitive peoples accomplish these feats? Von Däniken's answer? They didn't. Aliens did, or at least aliens helped, provided knowledge, shared technology, intervened in human development. Critics point out the flaws immediately. Von Däniken underestimates ancient human capability, misrepresents archaeological findings, makes logical leaps unsupported by evidence, assumes that because something seems difficult, it must be impossible. But criticism doesn't stop the books from selling. The idea resonates. It explains mysteries. It makes humanity special, chosen by advanced beings for contact and guidance. The ancient astronaut theory creates a framework for reinterpreting history. Every mythological god becomes an alien visitor. Every unexplained artifact becomes alien technology. Every ancient text describing beings from the sky becomes a historical document of extraterrestrial contact. This framework is hungry. It absorbs anything that fits its pattern. And in the 1970s, it absorbs the Black Knight satellite. The connection comes through Duncan Lunan, a Scottish author interested in space exploration. In 1973, Lunan publishes an analysis of those long-delay echoes, strange radio signals detected in the 1920s and 30s, signals that seem to echo back with unusual delays. Lunan proposes a thought experiment. What if these echoes contain a message? What if they're coming from a probe in our solar system? He works out a speculative interpretation, a message pointing to the star Epsilon Botis, an invitation, or a warning. Lunan presents this as speculation, a fun exercise in what if. He doesn't claim it's real, he's exploring possibilities. But von Däniken and others in the ancient astronaut community see something else, evidence. They take Lunan's speculation and run with it. A probe in the solar system becomes a satellite orbiting Earth. The time frame expands. Instead of decades, it's millennia. The Black Knight satellite gets absorbed into ancient astronaut lore. It becomes the Watcher, the probe left by ancient visitors, the evidence that we've been monitored since prehistory. Von Däniken's work gives this interpretation credibility, at least among believers. If aliens visited ancient civilizations, they might have left monitoring equipment. A satellite makes perfect sense. The time frame of 13,000 years gets attached around this period. Why 13,000? The number seems to come from various ancient astronaut calculations about when aliens supposedly visited Earth. Ice Age civilizations, lost advanced societies, the usual suspects in alternative history. No evidence supports this specific number, but it sounds ancient, prehistoric, before recorded history, perfect for a legend that it requires the satellite to predate human space capability. The ancient astronaut framework transforms the Black Knight from a possible spy satellite or space debris into something mythological. It's no longer just an object, it's an artifact, a relic, a connection to our cosmic heritage. This transformation is crucial. It elevates the story, makes it about more than just unknown objects in orbit. It becomes about human origins, our place in the universe, our relationship with advanced civilizations. Von Däniken himself probably never wrote extensively about the Black Knight specifically, but his framework made the story possible. He created the intellectual ecosystem where such legends thrive. The ancient astronaut theory does something psychologically powerful. It removes human agency from human achievement while simultaneously making us cosmically special. We didn't build the pyramids ourselves, but we were chosen for contact with advanced beings. This appeals to two contradictory impulses: humility about our capabilities, pride about our significance. We're not smart enough to have done these things, but we're important enough that aliens want to guide us. The Black Knight satellite fits this pattern perfectly. We didn't put it there, but it's watching us, monitoring our development, evidence that we matter to someone out there. By the 1990s, when the internet begins connecting enthusiasts globally, the ancient astronaut interpretation of the Black Knight is well established. It's woven into the larger tapestry of alternative history, mentioned alongside other supposed evidence of alien visitation. This contextualization matters. The Black Knight isn't evaluated on its own merits. It's part of a package. If you believe in ancient astronauts, the Black Knight makes sense. If you don't, it's obviously nonsense. Von Däniken's influence extends beyond his specific claims. He normalized speculative interpretation of history, made it acceptable to question mainstream archaeology, created space for alternative theories. Some of this is valuable. Healthy skepticism of authority can reveal genuine oversights. Sometimes conventional wisdom is wrong, but it also enables unfalsifiable theories. If you start with the conclusion that aliens visited Earth, you can find evidence everywhere, because you're not testing a hypothesis, you're confirming a belief. The Black Knight satellite benefits from this confirmation bias. Each new piece of supposed evidence gets added to the pile. Each contradiction gets explained away. Each mundane explanation gets rejected as cover-up. Lunan himself has repeatedly clarified that his work was speculative, that he never claimed the long-delay echoes were definitely from an alien probe, that his translation was an intellectual exercise, not a serious claim. But these clarifications rarely accompany references to his work. The ancient astronaut community cites him as support, uses his name to add credibility, strips away his caveats and uncertainties. This pattern repeats throughout the Black Knight legend. Legitimate scientists making speculative comments, authors proposing thought experiments, researchers exploring possibilities, all get retrofitted into a narrative they never endorsed. The ancient astronaut connection gives the Black Knight story emotional weight. It's no longer just about an unknown object. It's about humanity's cosmic destiny, our relationship with advanced civilizations, the secrets hidden from us by authorities. These themes resonate deeply. They touch on fundamental questions about who we are and where we came from. They promise that we're not alone, that there's meaning to our existence beyond random chance. Even people who don't literally believe in ancient astronauts find the stories compelling. They're fun to think about. They add wonder to history. They make the past feel magical. This is why the Black Knight legend persists. It's not really about a satellite. It's about mystery, about the possibility that reality is stranger than we're told, about the hope that we're connected to something larger than ourselves. The science of space, debris, a crowded sky. Look up at night. The stars seem fixed, eternal, unchanging. But space near Earth tells a different story. It's crowded, chaotic, filled with humanity's cast-off dreams. Since Sputnik in 1957, we've launched thousands of satellites. Most are still up there, dead, silent, tumbling through orbit, joined by rocket stages, fragments from collisions, flecks of paint traveling at 17,000 miles per hour. Space debris specialists track these objects. The U.S. Space Surveillance Network monitors everything larger than 10 centimeters. That's about 34,000 objects, everything from defunct satellites to bolts shaken loose during launches. Objects smaller than 10 centimeters, estimates suggest over 100 million pieces, too small to track individually, large enough to cause catastrophic damage. Dr. Donald Kessler worked for NASA studying orbital debris. In 1978, he proposed a scenario now called Kessler syndrome. As debris increases, collisions become more likely. Each collision creates more debris. More debris means more collisions. The cascade accelerates. At some threshold, Earth orbit becomes unusable, too dangerous for satellites, too risky for spacecraft. Humanity trapped on the planet by our own garbage. We're not there yet, but we're heading that direction. Every launch adds mass. Every collision multiplies fragments. The problem grows exponentially. This context matters for understanding the Black Knight legend. Space near Earth isn't empty. It's a junkyard. Thousands of objects humans put there. thousands more created by accident. When radar detects something unknown, the likely explanation is debris, not alien artifacts, not ancient satellites, just pieces of human technology we've lost track of. The Space Surveillance Network catalogs everything they can, but the catalog is incomplete. Some objects are too small, some are in unusual orbits, some are classified and not publicly listed. This creates gaps in public knowledge. Most debris is explained, but some isn't, and unexplained objects feed speculation. Take the tumbling thermal blanket from STS-88. Before it was photographed and identified, it was just another radar contact. Unknown object, irregular movement, strange radar signature. Had it not been photographed, it might still be unexplained, listed in internal catalogs but not connected to any specific event. Another piece of the mystery. Orbital mechanics governs how objects behave in space. Newton's laws apply. Objects without propulsion follow predictable paths. Higher orbits decay slower. Lower orbits decay faster. Everything eventually falls unless actively maintained. This creates a problem for the Black Knight legend. An object can't orbit Earth for 13,000 years without propulsion. Atmospheric drag, however slight, would pull it down. Even at high altitudes, enough atmosphere exists to cause gradual decay. Satellites in low Earth orbit typically last 5 to 10 years before re-entering. Medium orbits last longer. Geostationary orbit can be stable for centuries. But 13,000 years? Impossible without active station keeping. Some believers suggest the Black Knight is in a very high orbit, but radar wouldn't detect it there. The supposed sightings place it in low orbit, where it couldn't possibly survive millennia. This contradiction doesn't stop the legend, because most people don't understand orbital mechanics. The sky seems empty, objects seem permanent. The idea that satellites naturally fall isn't intuitive. Dr. Jonathan McDowell, an astrophysicist at Harvard, that maintains a detailed database of every object launched into space. His records show the reality. Thousands of satellites, most dead, all tracked, none unidentified. When asked about the Black Knight satellite, McDowell is direct. There's no mystery object. The things people point to are all identified. Thermal blankets, rocket stages, known satellites. But believers counter that he's part of the cover-up, or that he's been deceived by authorities, or that the real Black Knight is hidden in the classified portion of the catalog. These responses reveal how conspiracy thinking works. Expert testimony gets dismissed. Data gets reinterpreted. Evidence gets explained away. The actual science of tracking space objects is fascinating. Ground-based radar sends pulses, measures the return, calculates position and velocity, does this repeatedly to determine orbit. Optical telescopes provide another method, especially for objects in higher orbits. Reflections of sunlight reveal position. Tracking over time reveals trajectory. Both methods have limitations. Small objects are hard to detect. Dark objects reflect less light. Objects in unusual orbits might be missed. But the idea that a large satellite could orbit Earth undetected for decades stretches credibility, especially one supposedly in low orbit, where it would be easily spotted. Amateur satellite trackers add another layer. Hobbyists worldwide scan the sky. They spot classified military satellites, track them, share orbital data. They've found secret launches, unannounced maneuvers, hidden payloads. If a mysterious ancient satellite existed, amateurs would have found it, photographed it, calculated its orbit. The community is too dedicated, too observant, too interconnected. The lack of amateur confirmation is telling. These are people actively looking for unusual objects, finding real satellites that governments don't acknowledge, yet none have found the Black Knight. Space debris poses real dangers. The International Space Station regularly maneuvers to avoid debris. Satellites are designed with shielding. Mission planners carefully choose launch windows to minimize collision risk. This is the reality of near-Earth space. Not mysterious, not magical, carefully monitored and managed, a hazardous environment created by human activity. The U.S. Strategic Command publishes regular updates about orbital debris, close approaches, collisions, new launches. The data is publicly available. Anyone can verify what's up there. This transparency undermines the Black Knight legend. How can a satellite remain hidden when the sky is so thoroughly monitored? The answer from believers: military capabilities exceed what's publicly acknowledged. They can track the Black Knight but choose not to disclose it. The public catalog is incomplete by design. This might be true for some classified satellites, but an ancient alien artifact? Unlikely that every spacefaring nation would cooperate in hiding it. Russia, China, Europe, India, Japan all have space surveillance capabilities. All would detect a large unknown object. International cooperation on covering up an alien satellite seems less plausible than the alternative, that no such satellite exists. The science of space debris ultimately undermines the Black Knight legend. Orbital mechanics, tracking capabilities, amateur observation all point to the same conclusion. The sky is crowded but catalogued, mysterious but explained. The thermal blanket photographed by STS-88 is typical space debris, one of millions of objects humans have scattered across near-Earth orbit. Not special, not ancient, just another piece of our technological footprint. The echoes, radar, pings, and Project West Ford 1927, a Norwegian engineer named Jürgen Hals conducts radio experiments. He transmits a signal, waits for the response. It comes back, but not immediately. There's a delay, 3 seconds, then another echo, even longer delayed. He documents this phenomenon, shares it with other researchers. More experiments follow, more echoes, each with unusual delays, sometimes seconds, sometimes longer. The pattern is irregular, unpredictable. These become known as long delay echoes, LDEs. For decades, they puzzle scientists. Radio signals shouldn't echo back with such delays. The signal travels at light speed, bounces off the ionosphere, and returns in fractions of a second, not multiple seconds. Researchers propose explanations. Maybe signals are bouncing between Earth and the Moon. Maybe atmospheric conditions create unusual reflection patterns. Maybe ionospheric disturbances cause the delays. None of the explanations fully satisfy. The LDEs remain anomalous, interesting, curious, but not particularly important in the broader context of radio science. Then Duncan Lunan in 1973 proposes his thought experiment. What if these echoes contain a message? What if an alien probe is intercepting signals and retransmitting them with artificial delays? He plots the delay patterns, looks for structure, finds what seems like a star map, pointing to Epsilon Botis, a message from ancient visitors. Lunan presents this as speculation, a fun intellectual exercise, not a serious claim about reality, but the ancient astronaut community seizes on it. Here's proof. Radio signals from space, a message, evidence of extraterrestrial monitoring. The LDEs get incorporated into the Black Knight legend. The satellite isn't just watching, it's communicating, sending signals, trying to reach us. Modern analysis suggests simpler explanations for LDEs: atmospheric ducting, signal reflections through complex paths, equipment artifacts. None require alien probes, but the echoes serve an important function in the mythology. They provide another thread, another piece of supposed evidence. Something that sounds scientific but remains mysterious enough to support speculation. Then there's Project West Ford. This one's real, documented, strange enough to sound like fiction. 1963, the US military launches millions of copper needles into orbit. Literally, tiny copper dipoles, each about 2 centimeters long, designed to create an artificial ionosphere for radio communication. The plan is strategic. If solar activity disrupts Earth's natural ionosphere, radio communications fail. Having a backup layer of reflective material in orbit ensures military communications continue even during electromagnetic storms. The project launches successfully. The needles disperse, they create a reflective band around Earth. Radio signals bounce off them as designed. But there are problems. The needles clump together, they don't disperse evenly. Some fall too quickly, others stay in orbit longer than expected. Tracking them becomes difficult. Astronomers are furious. The needles interfere with optical observations. They reflect sunlight, create streaks across long exposure photographs, pollute the pristine environment of space. Public outcry follows. The military abandons further launches, but the needles already in orbit remain. Many eventually fall. Some are still up there, tiny fragments of Cold War paranoia tumbling through space. Project West Ford matters because it demonstrates something important. The military really did put weird things in orbit, things that sound absurd but served strategic purposes, things that were initially classified or underreported. This verified strangeness feeds speculation about other hidden projects. If they scattered millions of needles in space, what else might they have done? The copper needles could explain some radar anomalies. A clump of needles might produce an unusual radar signature, irregular, difficult to identify, not matching any known satellite. Could some reported Black Knight sightings actually be West Ford needles? Possibly. Radar operators detecting unknown objects might have been picking up needle clusters, misidentified because the project wasn't widely known. This explanation is more plausible than ancient alien satellites. But it's also less exciting. Copper needles don't have the mythological weight of extraterrestrial artifacts. The LDEs and West Ford represent opposite ends of a spectrum. LDEs are mysterious radio signals with mundane explanations that get reinterpreted as alien communication. West Ford is a mundane project with such a weird premise that it sounds like alien technology. Both contribute to the Black Knight legend by establishing that space is strange, that governments do unusual things, that not everything has obvious explanations. The combination of mysterious echoes and verified strange satellites creates fertile ground for myth-making. If these weird things are real, maybe other weird things are too. Researchers have largely moved on from LDEs. They occur rarely. Modern radio equipment doesn't encounter them often. The mechanisms that might cause them are better understood. They're a footnote in radio science history. But they remain in the cultural memory, especially among UFO researchers and ancient astronaut enthusiasts. They're cited as evidence, proof that something unusual is happening, that signals from space carry messages. Lunan himself has spent decades clarifying that his work was speculative, that he doesn't believe LDEs are actually alien messages, that his star map interpretation was meant as an intellectual exercise. His clarifications matter little. The genie is out. The interpretation exists. People cite his work without his caveats. Project West Ford, meanwhile, remains a strange historical fact, a real project that sounds unreal. The kind of thing that makes people wonder what else governments have done without public knowledge. The needles themselves are harmless. They're too small to damage spacecraft. Most have already fallen. The ones remaining will eventually decay and burn up. But their existence proves that space programs involve projects the public wouldn't imagine. That strategic thinking during the Cold War produced strange solutions. That orbit contains objects people wouldn't expect. This is the environment in which the Black Knight legend thrives. Real mysteries like LDEs, real strange projects like West Ford, gaps in public knowledge, verified secrecy, all create plausibility for additional mysteries that don't actually exist. The echoes continue in a metaphorical sense, radio signals bouncing through culture, stories reflecting and amplifying, each retelling adding delay, adding distortion, creating patterns that seem meaningful but are actually artifacts of transmission. Deconstructing the myth. Why we believe Sarah opens her laptop. It's late. She's researching for a school project, types mysterious satellites into search, clicks a video. 20 minutes later, she's convinced something strange orbits Earth. The video was persuasive, professional looking, cited sources, showed photographs, made logical arguments, each piece of evidence built on the last. By the end, the conclusion seemed inevitable. Sarah isn't foolish. She's a good student, critical thinker. But the presentation was effective. It told a story that made sense, that connected dots she'd never considered. This is how belief forms, not through stupidity, through pattern recognition, through compelling narratives, through the very cognitive tools that usually serve us well. Dr. Michael Shermer, founder of the Skeptics Society, calls it patternicity, the tendency to find meaningful patterns in meaningless noise. Humans evolved to spot patterns. It kept us alive. The rustling in grass might be wind, or it might be a predator. Better to assume pattern when none exists than miss a real pattern and get eaten. This bias toward finding meaning is hardwired, useful in most contexts, problematic when applied to ambiguous information. The Black Knight satellite is a perfect storm of patternicity, multiple unrelated events that seem connected. Tesla's signals, Kehoe's radar contacts, the STS-88 photograph, Project West Ford. Each is explainable independently. But together, the pattern seems too strong to be coincidence. This is confirmation bias in action. Once you believe a pattern exists, you see evidence everywhere. Each new piece confirms what you already think. Contradictory evidence gets dismissed. Ambiguous evidence gets interpreted favorably. Dr. Carl Sagan wrote about this in The Demon-Haunted World. He called it the fine art of baloney detection. Critical thinking requires asking uncomfortable questions, seeking disconfirming evidence, considering alternative explanations. But critical thinking is hard work. Pattern recognition is effortless, automatic, feels right. The brain rewards pattern recognition with pleasure. We like connecting dots. We enjoy the sensation of understanding. The Black Knight Night legend provides multiple hits of this pleasure. Each piece of supposed evidence triggers satisfaction. Look, another confirmation. See how it all fits together. The feeling is powerful, addictive even. Social reinforcement amplifies belief. Online communities form around shared interests. Members support each other, challenge outsiders, create echo chambers where alternative viewpoints are rare. Spend enough time in these communities and the belief seems normal. Everyone agrees, everyone sees the same patterns. Skeptics are dismissed as closed-minded, or as part of the cover-up, or as simply not understanding the evidence. This social dimension is crucial. Beliefs aren't just cognitive, they're tribal. Accepting the Black Knight legend means joining a community. Rejecting it means leaving or never joining. Identity gets wrapped up in the belief. Dr. Robert Cialdini's research on persuasion explains another factor: commitment and consistency. Once we take a public position, we feel pressure to maintain it. Changing our mind feels like admitting we were wrong, admitting foolishness, so we double down, find more evidence, develop more sophisticated arguments, not because the evidence gets stronger, because our commitment deepens. The internet accelerates all of this. Information spreads instantly. Communities form globally. Echo chambers intensify, but also debunking spreads just as fast. Fact checkers respond. Skeptics organize. Counter-narratives emerge. The result is polarization, believers and skeptics talking past each other. Each side convinced the other is either foolish or dishonest. No middle ground, no productive dialogue. For the Black Knight legend specifically, several cognitive factors converge. The subject matter is exotic: space, aliens, ancient mysteries. These topics trigger wonder. Imagination, the desire for reality to be more interesting than it seems. The evidence is diverse: photos, radio signals, radar contacts, government projects. Each piece comes from different sources, different eras. This diversity creates an illusion of convergence. Multiple independent lines of evidence supposedly pointing to the same conclusion. Except they're not independent. They're only connected through retrospective interpretation. Tesla never mentioned satellites. Kehoe never described the object people now call Black Knight. The STS-88 photo is documented as a thermal blanket. The connections are imposed afterward by people looking for patterns, by people wanting the story to be true. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman wrote about two systems of thinking. System 1 is fast, automatic, pattern-seeking. System 2 is slow, analytical, critical. Most of our thinking is System 1. It's efficient, but it's prone to biases. The Black Knight legend appeals to System 1. It feels right. The patterns seem clear. The story is compelling. System 2 would ask questions, seek alternatives, demand better evidence. But System 2 is lazy. It doesn't engage unless forced. This is why debunking is hard. You're asking people to do cognitive work, to engage System 2, to question patterns their System 1 already accepted. It's uncomfortable, requires effort. Most people resist. Add in the emotional appeal. The Black Knight legend makes humans special. We're being watched, monitored. We matter to someone. This narcissistic element is powerful. We want to believe we're important, that we're not alone. Contrast that with the mundane truth: space debris, misidentified thermal blankets, natural radio phenomena. These explanations make us ordinary. Our junk floating in orbit, our mistakes documented in photographs, nothing special. Which narrative feels better? Which one would you rather believe? The emotional appeal is lopsided. The Black Knight legend also benefits from unfalsifiability. Can't prove a negative, can't prove something doesn't exist. So believers always have an out. The evidence just hasn't been found yet. The government is hiding it. The satellite is cleverly avoiding detection. Every absence of evidence becomes evidence of conspiracy. Every denial becomes confirmation. The theory protects itself. This is characteristic of pseudoscience. Real science makes falsifiable predictions, tests them, accepts results. Pseudoscience shields itself from testing, reinterprets failures as successes, never admits being wrong. Understanding why we believe doesn't make believers foolish. It makes us human. We all have these biases. We all find patterns where none exist. We all prefer stories that make us feel good. The difference is whether we catch ourselves, whether we engage that slow, effortful system 2 thinking, whether we demand better evidence before accepting extraordinary claims. The Black Knight satellite is a myth, but it's a revealing one. It shows us how we think, how we process information, how we construct meaning from ambiguity. It's not really about a satellite at all. It's about us, our hopes, our biases, our need for mystery in an increasingly explained world. The true legacy, a modern folklore. The Black Knight satellite doesn't exist, not as an ancient alien artifact, not as a 13,000-year-old watcher in the sky. The evidence dissolves under scrutiny. Each thread leads to mundane explanations. Jupiter's radio emissions, asteroid detections, space debris, thermal blankets. Yet the legend persists, thrives even. Millions believe. More encounter the story every day. It spreads across cultures, adapts to new contexts, evolves with each retelling. This persistence is the real story. Not what's in orbit, but what's in our collective imagination. Folklore once meant oral traditions. Stories passed down through generations, changed through retelling, shaped by cultural needs, reflecting shared values and fears. The Black Knight satellite is modern folklore. Born in the digital age, spread through internet networks, changed through social media sharing, shaped by contemporary anxieties about government secrecy and human significance. Traditional folklore explained natural phenomena. Thunder was God's bowling. Seasons changed because Persephone visited the underworld. Stories gave meaning to mystery. The Black Knight serves a similar function. Space is vast, empty, terrifying in its indifference. The idea that something watches us makes the void less lonely, less random, less meaningless. We've explored enough of space now to know the basic facts. No aliens on Mars, no civilizations on Venus. The solar system is mostly dead rock and gas. The nearest stars are impossibly distant. We're alone as far as we can detect. This reality is uncomfortable. We want company. We want meaning. We want to believe something out there cares about us. The Black Knight provides that comfort. It's a secular creation myth, a story that says we matter, that we're special enough to monitor, that we're not cosmic accidents in an uncaring universe. This psychological function matters more than whether the satellite exists. The belief serves emotional needs. Trying to debunk it with facts misses the point. People don't believe because of evidence. They believe because of what the belief provides. Traditional folklore also reinforced community bonds. Shared stories created shared identity. The tribe that believed the same myths cohered more strongly. Online communities around the Black Knight legend serve the same function. Members share information, support each other's beliefs, defend against skeptics. The belief creates belonging. This explains why evidence doesn't change minds. Accepting debunking means leaving the community, abandoning the identity. Admitting you were wrong in front of your peers. The social cost is too high. Folklore historians recognize that myths reveal cultural anxieties. Vampire legends reflected fears about disease and death. Fairy tales encoded warnings about dangerous strangers. Stories externalized internal concerns. The Black Knight legend externalizes several contemporary anxieties: government secrecy, the vastness of space, human insignificance, technological change outpacing understanding. Each of these finds expression in the story. Government secrecy is real. Classified projects exist. Public trust in institutions has declined. The belief that authorities hide important truths resonates because sometimes they do. The Black Knight becomes a symbol of this broader mistrust. Space exploration revealed our cosmic isolation. We thought we'd find neighbors. We found emptiness. This discovery is psychologically difficult. The Black Knight legend offers an alternative. We're not alone. Something is watching. The universe is less empty than it appears. Human insignificance is perhaps the deepest anxiety. We want to matter. The Black Knight says we do. Enough for aliens to monitor us. Enough for ancient civilizations to leave watchers. Our existence means something beyond biological accident. Technological change creates uncertainty. We don't understand the systems we depend on. Satellites orbit above. Computers think in ways we can't follow. AI makes decisions we can't explain. Mystery surrounds us. The Black Knight represents this technological mystery, an artifact beyond understanding, evidence that technology can be mysterious, that not everything is explainable. This feels true because much of modern life is opaque to us. These anxieties are legitimate. The story addresses real concerns. This is why it resonates. It's not random nonsense. It's a meaningful response to meaningful uncertainties. Folklore also provides entertainment. Stories break monotony, create excitement, offer escape from daily routine. The Black Knight legend serves this function too. Life is ordinary for most people. The story promises something more: mystery, wonder, the possibility that reality is stranger than we're told. This is appealing, fun, a source of engagement with ideas beyond routine concerns. Internet culture accelerates folklore evolution. Traditional stories changed slowly, across generations. Digital stories change rapidly, across months. Each meme mutates, each share adds variation. Natural selection operates in real time. The Black Knight legend has evolved significantly since its scattered origins. New evidence gets incorporated, old evidence gets reinterpreted. The narrative shapeshifts to remain compelling to new audiences. This adaptability is a strength. Traditional folklore that couldn't adapt died out. Stories that remained relevant survived. The Black Knight remains relevant by incorporating new findings, new photographs, new testimonies, new frameworks. It will likely survive debunking, might even thrive because of it. Forbidden knowledge is more appealing than accepted knowledge. Telling people a story is false often increases its spread. Debunking creates the impression of something worth hiding. The legend's legacy is not as factual truth. It's as cultural artifact, a perfect example of how myths form in the information age, how pattern recognition creates false connections, how communities cohere around shared beliefs, how emotional needs drive acceptance of weak evidence. Studying the Black Knight legend teaches us about ourselves, our cognitive biases, our social needs, our relationship with mystery. These lessons are valuable regardless of what orbits Earth. The satellite exists in cultural space, in the realm of stories and meanings. This is real in its own way. Cultural reality shapes how people think and behave, influences what they believe and what they question. Dismissing the legend as simply false misses its significance. The truth of its non-existence is less interesting than the reality of its persistence. We are storytelling creatures. We create narratives to make sense of experience. The Black Knight satellite is one such narrative, a modern myth reflecting modern concerns, a folklore tale for the digital age. It reveals our desire for mystery in an increasingly explained world, our need for significance in an indifferent cosmos, our tendency to see patterns where none exist, our willingness to believe stories that make us feel less alone. These are deeply human traits, not flaws, but features. The same pattern recognition that creates false myths also enables scientific discovery. The same desire for meaning that accepts weak evidence also drives artistic creation. The same social cohesion that reinforces belief also builds communities. The Black Knight satellite is us, our hopes, our fears, our biases, our creativity, our need to find meaning in the void. It will continue orbiting, not in physical space, but in cultural space, passed from person to person, changed with each telling, adapting to new contexts, serving the emotional and social needs of whoever encounters it. This is its true legacy, not as evidence of alien visitation, but as evidence of human imagination, as a mirror reflecting our relationship with mystery, as a story that reveals what we want the universe to be. The sky above is crowded with human debris, our satellites, our junk, our abandoned dreams made manifest in orbit. But the Black Knight satellite flies only in our minds, and there it will continue flying long after all our physical satellites have fallen to Earth and burned away.